Good morning, everybody. Happy Baby Friday, y'all. I see we have a lot of people giving some comments already with good morning. So Michelle was our first one in. So good morning, Michelle. Good morning, Banu and Allison, Holly, Joanna, Catherine. So if y'all want to put a little hello out or good morning to everybody and let us know where you are watching from, then we can kind of give your city a little props there. So, oh, good. Hey, Kim, how are you doing? A good morning to you. Kim's from Garland, Texas. So it's good to see everybody. We are today going to be discussing some congenital cardiac cath codes, the changes that they made to them, I have I'm very happy to welcome a special guest with me. She is not only a colleague, but a longtime friend of mine. And actually, when she took her PMCC instructor course, I was an instructor to the instructors. So I've known Sharon for a long time. She's been in the profession for 36 years. She beat me out by a few years there. And she has been a PMCC instructor for 17 of those years. She now does the online instructor thing with the AAPC through their online courses. And she looks into specialties that she has are IVR and cardiology, which is why I invited her on today. She also does OB-GYN, family practice, internal medicine, infectious disease. So she kind of is a spattering around like me, which is fun. I like that. And she also is an author and co-contributor for medical coding and training and publications like Step by Step and HealthCon, the magazine. She's been writing articles in there. She is a former member of the AAPC Chapter Association Board of Directors, of the BOD, everybody called it. And so I would love and am very pleased to welcome Mrs. Sharon Oliver. Hey, Miss Sharon.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Betty. How are you this morning?
I am
sunny
great.
Florida.
Yes. Well, you know, I don't like to rub it in people's noses, but it was kind of cold this morning. It was like 45.
Oh, geez. I'm so sorry.
Now it's about 70.
So sorry.
You know,
yeah.
That's
we're in the 20s. It was spitting snow about an hour ago, and it's dreary.
I do not miss
you
that.
have kept me from, this is what you've kept me from today. Wrapping up in my blanket that says Yellowstone watching blanket and my bonbons and a good book.
And
so I'm here for you, Betty.
Thank you, dear. Yeah, I know you got the blanket under you and a space heater on your feet, right?
I'm telling you, got it going. Got it going. If it's not the space heater, it's going to be the dog. So.
Oh, there you go. I have Holly Brown. Holly says, hi, Sharon.
Hello.
And have a comment from Kimberly again, says that Miss Sharon Oliver is a rock star in the cardiovascular arena.
I know Kim, she's an Alabama fan also.
I met her in Dallas. She did a live pig cath demonstration for my local chapter, Richardson, Texas, a few years ago.
I loved it.
She's saying hey out to you.
Hey back. I tell you, she's a sweetheart.
Yes, I like him. I do some presenting with her for Ozark on their summits and stuff. We have one coming up. So Kimberly is very well versed herself in the coding and billing. What'd you say?
I said, sign me up. That suitcase will travel.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about the new congenital cardiac cath codes. And so we made a little presentation, Sharon and I did, where we'll cover a few things. And for those of y'all that have seen me present on things before, know that I like to cover both sides with the ICD-10 and the CPT when we're looking at stuff. So we're going to talk about some of the ICD-10 codes first for congenital anomalies, and then we're going to move into the CPT codes and look at those for a minute. Sharon, I know, you've been in the field for a while. So what is it about cardiology that, it's kind of, spurred you to take that on?
Well, have you ever heard the term thrown into it? So I'm sitting there doing my infectious disease and all of my hospitalist stuff and everything. And then the boss calls me in and she said, how would you like to do cardiology? Say what? So it was a learning experience. You never get too old to learn. And, and if any people have any doubts, I will just give you a little small history. I was 56 years old when I got my CPC. I'll be 75 in 3 weeks.
And you look wonderful.
No. You don't have to say that. I do need a
I do, because you do.
I'm waiting for the Powerball to roll my way. So it was so interesting. And I wound up having good doctors that were willing to teach, except one who did not like me at all before he ever walked in the room and met me. And then we wound up presenting together in 2008 at HealthCon. It wasn't HealthCon back then. But so that's how the transition went. And I've loved it. And I found that it's just intriguing, and how the body works, the organ systems work off the heart, and they say, and it's printed, that it's the hardest working muscle in the body. So I thought, here's this little fist-sized thing that's making everything else go. How?
Yeah.
How's it doing it? And so I just started from there, Betty. I just started from there. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. I did it enough to pass my CPC, and then it was out of the picture.
Yeah, I found when I used to teach, the PMCC courses, that for people that weren't, that were coming in new, that weren't like already working and trying to get certified, when we would go through all the sections of CPT, I love cardiology too, that. So when I get to cardiology, when I teach it, I would either, the students would come to me after, and it would be either, I really like this, it's so cool, how do I learn more? Or it was like, I never want to see this again.
Yeah. And what I love it, and which of course we're passionate in teaching. And can I tell a funny about you and I?
Certainly.
So Betty had, at the time that I met her in 2005, she had a different last name. So then here comes this name, Betty Hovey, and I thought, okay. Then I saw a little thumbprint picture. And I said, I know that woman. And I contacted her because she had her information. And I said, Betty. And then I thanked her for allowing me to become an instructor, because she was the one. And so you never know where your path is going to cross. And you take advantage of every friendship and relationship that you come up with. Holly's one of them. I think we were on the bod together. Kim, meeting her in Dallas. I mean, you just keep that connection, and that's how you keep learning.
Yeah.
Off of someone, the networking. We call it the networking. But like, if I had this opening here as a whiteboard, you wouldn't see me sitting down. I'd be drawing all over that whiteboard. So it's fun. It's fun, and I love it. I love it.
And you are very good at it. And I'm sure all your students appreciate your knowledge and sharing it.
I try, and I like critiquing. So anybody that wants to critique me today is welcome to. Just don't tell Betty. Yeah. So, but I like to have fun with it and make fun with it. And it's serious work. It's serious conditions. And like the congenitals that we're going over today is serious business, not only for the infant, the baby, but the parents and what all is going on in their lives for quite a while, some of them.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and Sharon, just for everybody's knowledge too, has graciously agreed to come on board with Compliant Healthcare Solutions and be one of my contracted specialists. So as we roll different things out, like our helpline and webinars and things like that, you'll be seeing a lot more of Miss Sharon through the CHCS website and company. And I'm really glad to be joined up with her again.
Well, my pleasure and my honor.
Thank you.
My honor that you accepted me.
All right. Well, I am going to pull up our PowerPoint for today. And as I said, we're going to just take a look at some of the congenital cardiac cath things, starting with ICD-10 first, and taking a look at how that feeds into the CPT code changes and how you need to understand what you're looking at with those in order to be able to choose the right cath code, because they made like a little change with how they're doing it, but it makes a big difference in RVUs for your physician and what's going on. So here. So first off, Sharon made some slides on congenital disorders. And Sharon, do you want to run through what you put together here?
Sure. So here's the top 10 common congenital disorders. So it by no means leaves everything else to the wayside. But cleft palate, you know, that's where the closure doesn't happen. And the cleft lip will come in and such a distortion of the baby and, you know, everything. And a lot of third world countries, because of the nutrition and care and everything. Down syndrome. I've never met an unhappy Down syndrome baby or person. And look how wonderful they are. And it was on the news the other day that there's one company, and that's all he hires is people that have a disability. And a lot of them were Down's children. And he even put their faces on the cups that they serve in their coffee and all. So, you know, even though it's that trisomy 21 defect and all, doesn't keep them from living and all. Today, heart defects, we're going to touch on 3 of the main ones that Betty and I, after discussion, that we thought would be good. But cystic fibrosis, and all the way down through, you see that we hear of these often. We hear of these often, but we want to set in on 3 of them today. And what we've listed, what I thought was interesting, here is what the Centers for Disease and all of that have listed as critical congenital heart defects. So the atrial septal defect, atrial ventricular septal defect, and the coarctation. And we're going to talk about the ASD and the double outlet ring ventricle today, and the transposition of the great arteries.
Yep.
So that's going to be our 3 that we're going to be discussing and show you some pictures of it. Because
Yep.
I'm a visual learner. I like visuals because you can sit there and talk to somebody and then you see them sitting there doing like this. And they'll have their pencil and they're doing like this. And if they got a clicking pen, they're doing that, driving me crazy.
Interesting with the CHDs, how you asterisked out these critical ones. I also got some information on the survival rates and things. So for the ones that are considered non-critical, the survival rates are pretty good through the first year of life is 97%, through 18 years is 95%. But when we look at the critical ones, the ones that have the asterisks by them, the survival rates drop pretty drastically through the first year to 75%, and then 18 years to 69%. So definitely, you know, we're talking about some issues that are very, very serious. When you hear anything that anytime they mention blue baby, that's when you're talking about these critical CHDs where, either one of the first ones when we talk about them, about the connections not going right. So you've got oxygenated and deoxygenated blood mixing. And that's why the babies have that blue look to them, because they're not getting good, fresh blood going through their systems. And so if you can't get that surgically repaired, those babies have a very low chance of survival.
And your best way to understand what's going on is knowing the basic foundation and the structure of the heart and its function.
Yes.
And if you don't know that, you're going to lose a lot.
Yep.
That you could be improving on or billing for better, using better codes, getting with the physician on the proper documentation to support it and all. So, Betty, you want me to start in?
Sure. I pulled up our DORV, our double outlet right ventricle. Now I am going to take us off the screen for a minute so that the slides show as big as possible.
Yeah. So that's great. So here you're going to see a normal heart. It's on the left side of the screen here. So the inferior and inferior vena cava feeds into the right atrium, of which, after the pressure gets right and everything, dumps into the right ventricle, which pushes the blood, after it gets its proper pressures, through the pulmonary artery. Now, and this is what I bring up when teaching. The pulmonary artery is the only artery in the body that carries deoxygenated blood. Goes out to the lungs, comes back in through the pulmonary veins. Those are the only veins that carries oxygenated blood. Dumps into the left atrium, to the left ventricle, and then out to the aorta, pushes to feed all of our body. Now we have approximately 75 trillion cells in the normal size human body. Now I'm probably at 150 trillion for my size, for those of you that know me. So that can vary, So what's happened here is when you look on the right side of the picture, you will see that the pulmonary artery and the aorta are both in the right ventricle, which is all deoxygenated side. So please keep in mind here, the right side of the heart, the right side of the heart, so turn this picture around to lay on you, and you'll see the right side of the heart is the venous side of the heart. You get to it through the vein system, the subclavian vein, and then it feeds into the superior vena cava and such. So there's no oxygen here. So we have to have oxygen, of course, to feed all that 75 trillion cells. So all the way from our head to our end of our toes. The hemoglobin, that's what the oxygen, the hemoglobin carries the oxygen. Those flat discs that you see pictures of on the hemoglobin, that's carrying that oxygen. And here it's not able to do it. This is also called, no, not this one, double outlet right ventricle. There's also a double outlet left ventricle. So pay attention to the documentation as what the doctor has told you that this person has. So is there any questions on this? Can you see the structure from normal to the abnormal that you see?
Yeah, if y'all want to shoot us a thumbs up if you're seeing everything, or if anybody has a question, just put them in the comments. As y'all know, it takes about 5 to 10 seconds for your comments to feed over into the platform. So if you have a question, put it in there, and as soon as I see it pop up, Sharon and I will try to address it for you.
Yeah. So this heart condition is present at birth, and which the two large vessels don't connect and to the heart normally. And when they're born with this, the main artery that carries the blood, which is the aorta, and the artery that directs the blood from the heart to the lungs, the pulmonary artery, connect partially or completely. So it's almost like they join. They join, almost kind of like an anastomosis is going on, where they, not that they're sewn together, but they connect together, like Siamese twins, or, you know, the connection that has on there. So this occurs when we have a single ventricle that arises from the absence of the ventricular septum. So when the infants have this condition, they have only one functional lower chamber of the heart, so the ventricle part. And
also something I wanted to point out, when you notice this in the normal heart, over here on the left side, the left ventricle, it's the most muscular. If you see the muscle there around the heart, how thick that is, versus in the DORV. And then on the right, you know, it's still a good size, but it's the thinner one, because the left ventricle normally does the hard work of pumping that blood up into the aorta. And with the double outlet right ventricle, because it's got both of them going in there, it even thins that wall out even more. So, you know, it brings on different conditions also.
Yeah, and you can see the hole in the septum connecting the two ventricles. And so therefore there is no oxygenated blood, except look up there in that left atrium. That can't do it. That absolutely cannot do it. So again, blue babies, this has to be taken care of immediately. Now, 1 in 10,000 babies will have this. 100,000, excuse me. 1 in 100,000 will have this. So this isn't, I don't want to say it's isn't uncommon, but I was surprised at the 100,000. I figured maybe 200,000 or 300,000. But quite a condition, quite a condition. So, you know, we have that. A lot of times this can be picked up on the ultrasounds, you know, in utero. So therefore, this is where the, you know, the OB is going to have a pediatric cardiologist that is able to do this, because look at the training, to get that baby to surgery as fast as they can, or if they can wait a few days, like it says here on that third bullet, they can wait a little bit, but they have to have it. They have to have the surgery right away. So I feel sorry for the parents, everybody that goes through this, the grandparents, the whole bit. So, and sometimes they can have other associated congenital heart defects, including other holes in the heart and valve problems and blood vessel problems, because that pressure that it's designed to do is just not there. Because we know the veins are very small pressure, where that artery, where she showed you the left ventricle, that muscle, that's the biggest muscle in the thing. Now, when you think that is pushing the blood out 72 times a minute to 80 to feed all of this, coming back through the capillaries after the waist is over and back up into the heart, and it just cannot function. It can't function. So I thought this was an interesting, and again, it can be either the right ventricle or the left ventricle, which would be the opposite of what's going on.
Right.
And so if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. If we want to wait till the end of the ICD-10 presentation.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in here yet, Sharon. So we can go ahead and move on to the TGA.
Okay, very good. Now this is also called, let me get back over here to my paper flip, discordant ventricle arterial connection. Discordant ventricular arterial connection. And when you look this up, and this is Q20.3 is your ICD-10 code. Also for the double outlet, I forgot to give it to you, is Q20.4 is your ICD-10 code for the double inlet ventricle. And for this one, it's Q20.3. So what's happened here is, again, we've got our normal heart on the left side of the picture. So dextrotransposition of the great arteries, so the DTGA, this is a birth defect in which the two main arteries carrying blood out of the heart, so the main pulmonary artery and the aorta are switched. So now the pulmonary artery is over on the arterial side, which carries deoxygenated blood, but the arterial side has the oxygenated blood. And then on the opposite side, the deoxygenated blood is carrying arterial blood out. So again, we have this mix that Betty was speaking of earlier that you can see happening. So now we don't get all of that oxygen that's needed. We have the blue baby syndrome, and we're just not getting fed. And when I say not getting fed, we're not getting fed the nutrients, the oxygen, everything that needs for survival. So this is a rare thing to happen. But in a baby without a congenital heart defect, the right heart pumps the oxygen, poor blood from the heart to the lungs through the pulmonary artery, and then brings it back in. So a normal process is going on. So babies with TGA, the oxygen poor blood from the body enters the right side of the heart, which remember I told you was the venous side, deoxygenated. But instead of going to the lungs, then the blood is pumped directly back into the rest of the body, back out to the rest of the body through the aorta. And again, we don't have any of that oxygen, nutrients, everything we need to survive. Because when we don't have, when people die, they're rotted in like 3 days. There's no oxygen, there's no nutrients, there's no surviving. The cells die. I mean, it just dies, and there's no getting it back. So the hole, they can have other defects, as we say up here, such as a hole between the lower chambers of the heart and ventricle. So see, it's kind of similar as far as that septum goes and that hole in the heart goes, and mixing the bloods. It's just now where is the main avenues of disbursement is all messed up. Okay.
And the septum, for those of y'all, when you think about it, the septum it's just a separator. Just like you have the septum in your nose, that separates your side. It's the same thing in your heart. So the term, when they talk about septal defects, they could, a nasal septal defect kind of thing, you could have a hole in the nasal septum, and here, in the septum in the heart, which is just the separator, but it keeps the oxygen and deoxygenated blood, from mixing together. So depending on ASD versus VSD, and we're going to look at the ASDs in a minute, that's just indicating in which area of the septum that the patient has that hole. And in some of these critical heart defects, they have them maybe in both places. So that's something also from a coding standpoint to be looking for. Is it an ASD or a VSD? They're just trying to denote which portion, the upper or the lower portion of the heart, has the hole in it.
And look at the complexity of the operation to correct.
Yes.
If we have a hole in the atrium and a hole in the ventricle septum, oh my gosh, it's like they're going to be in surgery for several hours with a team.
Yes.
There's nothing easy going on here.
Yeah, and we're talking about newborn babies on top of it. So when you think about that, you're talking about this little itty bitty, baby who probably isn't large to begin with because of, those defects that they have. These surgeons are operating on these little tiny babies. It just, to me, it's amazing.
And how much fight do they have in them when they're born? You know, so now where does that fight come from? Proper prenatal care. doing
Yep.
what the mother's supposed to do, like take away the smoking. And then the guidelines tells you any alcohol, it doesn't say 1 glass of wine in 9 months, but we've got codes for if any alcohol is consumed. For me, my downfall, and those of you that know me, and I'd love to see who knows this about me. What kind of cake do I like best? So,
I thought you were going to talk about moonshine, Sharon.
Oh no! I when I was on the bod, I took that to HealthCon.
Yep. You brought that once.
No.
You brought that once when we were at conference and had it. I remember you bringing the different flavors in. You and Jerry were sharing.
Dr. David Dunn said the apple pie. He said, "Oh, Sharon, this will go over vanilla ice cream so good." So I had to take him a quart the next time. A couple of other people. So I guess we'll get back to work. I love talking. So now atrial septal defect, and then you noticed on that list that we had a while ago, atrial ventricular septal defect. So again, what we've been talking about and what Betty mentioned, hole in the atrium septum and a hole in the ventricle septum. But here we're just have the atrial septal defect. And this hits 1 out of every 3. 1 out of every 3 babies.
Yeah.
So my niece was born with this, and she did well. And sometimes they don't have to do surgery. It will close on its own.
Yep.
Which is a good thing. So,
Yep.
you know, say in a year or whatever, 18 months out, they're good to go. Of course, they're going to be followed for a while to be sure everything stays connected the way it should and all. But they come out smaller. We're a huge family, and not in numbers, but in size. So she came out thin. So we knew, you knew something, which of course they'd already determined that it was there, but they're just smaller and just a different, when that heart doesn't work properly, look at what it doesn't feed. Again, we've talked about it more than once, what it doesn't feed, and it doesn't feed the body the way it needs to be to house all of our energy and everything. So this is a hole in the wall, and it divides the upper chambers, which of course are the atria, and it can vary in size. So we can have a little quarter size hole, or it can be, you know, take up the whole thing. None of it's good, but the smaller the better type of thing, you know, to where at least some of the blood is staying where it can be as much as possible. So, you know, the congenital part, and this develops during pregnancy. So it can be found on the ultrasounds and everything the proper way. And there are normally several openings that are in the wall that divide the upper chambers, and they'll close during pregnancy or shortly after birth. Again, we're talking prenatal care. And I know we're talking about congenital defects, but kind of where does it start from, or what can be our preventative to help out? I mean, it's whatever's going to be, it's going to be, but what can we do to help prevent, if anything? So when this doesn't close, we call it the ASD. So the blood flows through the lungs, and over time it can cause damage to the blood vessels because they're just working. They're working too hard. They're not getting what they need, the pressure they need that has to be, because those chambers in the heart have to have a certain amount of pressure before they open up and flow in and then flow out. So much is going on. So these can cause problems in adulthood because you're never through. Once you have something with the heart, you are never done. And congenital, on anything congenital, can go through all of your life. Adulthood, it can be there for the rest of your life. Even if you're a premature baby, that can follow you through the rest of your life.
And that brings up a good point from the ICD-10 side of it, Sharon, is that, some people are born with these congenital anomalies. And you see this a lot in cardiology where they have something, but if it's not a critical HD, then sometimes the patient can go their whole life and never know they had one, because the heart, when it's young and strong, kind of compensates for it. But as the patient gets older, then their heart, of course, starts to slow down a little bit, and it gets a little bit weaker. And we would get patients a lot that would come into cardiology that would be like in their 60s, 70s and say, I was an athlete, I was this, and then all of a sudden now I can't seem to walk a block without having to sit down. And, so it kind of catches up to them. Mm-hmm. And so then some studies are done, and sure enough, here they have this congenital anomaly that they've had their whole lives and never knew it. Now from coding, when you go to code that, and I know the answer to this, but, does that mean, Sharon, that you use a regular ICD-10 code, or are we supposed to use the congenital code even though they're an adult?
Or you would use the congenital code.
Yeah.
Because you were born with it. It just didn't develop or show up. Just like when Jerry went in the Army, and everybody knows me, knows Jerry. He's my trailer, as they say. But he went into the Army right out of high school, so he was 18 years old. They found a heart murmur. He had no idea. None. Now, they allowed him to stay in, thank heavens.
Good.
Because he did 22 years serving his country. But then when he came up with congestive heart failure about 3 or 4 years ago, a nurse that was checking his heart at the hospital bed, he said, do you know you have a heart murmur? First time that's been mentioned since Jerry was 18 years old.
Wow.
So almost 60 years later. Not quite 60, but 50 some odd years later.
They follow you.
It came out, and and he's been following cardiologists all along. Now, cardiologists think, okay, it's there. I know it's there, and just not mention it. Well,
right.
Yeah, that could happen, because what's routine for them? What's kind of a normal? Would it be abnormal to the patient if they were told that, or, so
right.
Communication. So, but a congenital, once it's defined as congenital, then it's congenital.
Yep. Okay.
It doesn't move over.
And I just wanted to
also. Am I right, teacher? Was that
yes,
right?
you are right. and I wanted to just, Holly made a comment, and I just wanted to point this out because, just blessings to Holly and her family.
Yes.
Since these babies have fight, trust me, our daughter was born at 22 weeks.
Yes.
So, going back to the comment that you had made about, the fighting the babies when they're working on these little ones. So, it's incredible.
And that baby had two of the strongest parents to get them through it.
Yep.
And that's a beautiful little girl. If you all have not seen her, she is beautiful and walking. And so it's like a miracle blessing, or a blessing miracle, however you want to say it. So it can be. The fight has to be there on all sides. Yep. So I appreciate the comment, Holly, and any other questions that anybody has. So because, a lot of this, again, this diagnosis comes during pregnancy, but don't be surprised if it pops up later. And I'm not talking maybe just these three, because especially when the arteries are reversed and everything, that's going to be automatic.
Right.
But on some of these others, those top 10 or any others, that can pop up. And so I'm glad Betty asked the question, how would you put a diagnosis code on it? So therefore, and we're talking authorizations, we're talking all kinds of stuff that impact if we do the wrong coding.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's take a look at the new CPT codes. Oh, and Holly said thank you, Sharon.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I'm telling you, she's a beautiful but girl little girl.
All right, so with the CPT guidelines, I highlighted a portion in here. And of course, in CPT, when you see they call it the bow tie, which is the little thing to the left of cardiac at the beginning. And then at the end, when they're done, there'll be the other one. So if there wasn't verbiage in between, it would be like a bow tie put together.
Yeah.
So
Betty, can I interject?
Oh, certainly.
For any of you that have your CPT book with you, which would be great if you do, that way you can highlight and everything what Betty's got here. It starts on page 775 of the CPT book for the guidelines.
Okay. So I highlighted one of the things that, because I find that especially sometimes us old timers, and again, I include myself in that group because I'm 30 plus years myself. We have a tendency to be a little lax sometimes on reading the guidelines because it's like, oh, I know it. But then when something changes, you have to really make sure that you're going through everything because here in the guidelines, as you see where I highlighted that, the services for anomalous coronary arteries arising from the aorta or off other coronary arteries like the PFO, patent foramen ovale, or MVP or bicuspid valve, in the absence of other congenital heart defects, you're not going to code them with the congenital cath codes. Instead, you're going to report them with the 93451 through 64, 66, 67, and 68, the non-congenital codes. So it's something that we need to make sure when we're looking at our documentation that we've got all this stuff in a row, that we're using the correct codes, because obviously the congenital codes are going to have a higher value than the non-congenital codes because of the extra complexity involved in the fact that there's this anomaly there. But from a CPT standpoint, and one of the reasons they made this change, I was at the CPT symposium in November when they were talking about these, is that, when they surveyed, they found, of course, that there's greater complexity, risk, and work involved when it's a congenital. But then they also found that within the congenital anomalies, depending on what's going on, it's even greater work. So they felt that the value for these things was varied enough that they needed to kind of subset the codes out. So for those that you see on the guidelines there, you would, if that was the only defect the patient had, then you would use the non-congenital codes. But if they are in conjunction with other CHDs, then you go ahead and use the congenital ones.
Can I just bring up one? Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, this can apply with cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
On a non-congenital thing, on a cabbage, where they have the cabbaged arteries, the lima and all of that going to the LAD and all. And then when you go in, so you've got a cabbaged heart condition, but if they go in and they do work on the right coronary artery that has nothing to do with the cabbaged heart vessels, coronary vessels, then you would use the regular non-cabbaged codes. So just kind of be aware, like Betty said, be aware of what has been worked on versus what is being worked on, and are they kind of two separate things?
Yep, good point. Now, also with the, we know I've been doing cardiology for, decades, as Sharon has. And one of the things that in the old days, we used to have, sometimes when you do an interventional case, you'd end up with like 9, 10, 11 CPT codes. And, 7 of them would have a modifier 59 on them. And you'd be like, yeah, okay. Where somebody else looking at it would be like, oh my gosh, is that, and they'd be freaking out because of all the stuff they see. But everything was piecemeal in what we did as far as coding, because there's so many different ways a cath can go when they get in there, or an intervention can go when they get in there, that they said this is the way that it has to be done in order for us to truly show what was being performed. But over the years, the RUC and CMS had them survey to what they see on the claims. And when they would see certain codes together all the time, they started bundling our stuff for us. So with the regular cath codes, you have the bundling of the angiography and stuff like that. But with the congenital ones, this in the guidelines, I kind of underlined in here, the extra reporting that can be done, or the additional, because it's again back to that piecemeal thing. So it doesn't typically involve thermodilution. So for that reason, it's separately reportable. If you do it, you use the add-on code 93598. Same thing, it does not include the right ventricular or right atrial angiography. So if that's also done, you're going to also add on 93566. So as you go through, and the Swan GANs, again, that would be additionally reported with the 93503. So make sure as you're going through the guidelines, once again, to have your job aids that will show your graphs that have, if it's non-congenital, these are, or CPT for the non-congenital stuff has those great tables in it that will show that checklist that if you do this, this, and this, these things are included, so you're not billing this separately. So, refer to that, take those out, Xerox them, and then laminate them. Miss Sharon and I talk about that all the time, that we're big fans of doing that kind of stuff to make sure you have something handy, so you're not digging for that big old CPT book all the time. Have those kind of things that you can kind of do it yourself thing, to where you have them to reference. But for the congenital ones, these are all additional codes you want to report. And, it's important, of course, to be aware of that so that you're not missing a ton of reimbursement. And then it also talks about the change with this normal and abnormal native connections. This is where it kind of jumps even subsetting, as I was talking about before. So in the guidelines, they talk about patients, even though they have a CHD, they still can have normal native connections, like that ASD. The connections going to the heart, the aorta, the pulmonary artery, those are all still in the correct place. So that's normal native connections. With the conditions, the TGA and the DORV that we looked at, those have abnormal native connections. They're not in the places that they're supposed to be. And so when the surgeons are doing these, then it's even more complex to do the ones with abnormal native connections than it is to do the ones with normal native connections. So it was different enough that they separated them out. So that's the big thing to watch in the codes. So if you look at the codes here on this slide, and again, I'll take us out for a second so you can see it as big as we can get it. You see that the first code, 93593, is a right heart cath for a CHD, and it does still include the imaging guidance though, but then it says normal native connections. And to the right, I put what the physician work RVUs are, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here as the complexity. So the physician work RVU, not the total RVUs, is 3.99. But if you do a right heart cath and the patient has an abnormal native connection, then it jumps to 6.10. Then we move down to the left heart cath. And that one is normal or abnormal because they're crossing over. They say the complexity is going to be up no matter what. So that one, there's just the one code for, and it's at 5.50 physician work RVUs. And then we have the combo, the right and left. If it's normal native connections, to the right, it's 6.84. If it's abnormal native connections, it jumps up 2 whole RVUs to 8.88. And then they have that thermal dilution that we were talking about in the guidelines that is an add-on code, which is 1.44 physician work RVUs. So it's important when you're talking to your doctor about the documentation and things. Now, there's sometimes if they say the patient has a DORV, you know, by nature, that's going to be an abnormal native connection. So they don't have to be saying in the report that it's an abnormal native connection, because that's what that means, right? So it's critical for your claims and for your reporting that you make sure that your ICD-10 codes are lining up with your CPT codes, and that you're, you know, putting the right ones in the on the right procedures, because that, you know, if you use a normal native connection CHD ICD-10 code, but you're picking an abnormal native connection CPT code, you know, that's probably going to get denied because it doesn't make sense. And it looks like you're trying to, you know, get that extra reimbursement out of it when it's not showing. So, because for some of these things that are congenital anomalies, they may also occur with the like mitral valves and things like that, with the prolapse and the different conditions. You can have them as congenital conditions, but they may also be non-congenital conditions. So you need to make sure you're choosing the correct ICD-10 code that shows if it's a congenital issue, that you're using the congenital code.
And Betty, can I bring up that there's a long line of parentheticals below the 93598 that please, and this is where I think a lot of people miscode because they don't go down to these parentheticals. Being an instructor, and you know yourself, you stress those parentheticals.
Yep.
That they give us a lot of directions. So sometimes we read those guidelines and there's so much information and all them words in there together. Those parentheticals a lot of times can help break it out for you. What can I do? What can I not do? So don't overlook those.
Great. And then here is a list of our resources that we used for our little slideshow here today, so that y'all can refer back to them if you want to look something up. They'll be they're up here, and then on the replay, if you want to catch them and watch it again, you know, you'll be able to find them there. All right. So one thing I wanted to let everybody know was that if this is something that, you know, you have interest in or want to kind of dig into a little bit more. And while I'm saying this, if there's any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments so that Sharon and I, we make sure we get them addressed here. But Sharon and I are going to offer a webinar on this specific conditions here. And we chose February 14th as the day to do it because it's Valentine's Day. So we thought it kind of fit. And I have not gotten, I submitted for the approval for CEU from AAPC, but I haven't gotten the approval back yet. So it is pending. And so I am waiting to put a notice out about this because, you know, we're not allowed to, in our advertising thing, to say it's pending approval or whatever. So I'm waiting to get the approval before you'll see an announcement for it on LinkedIn and stuff from me. But we're going to do the webinar and go through some of those other conditions that you saw at the beginning. We're going to go through the CPT codes in a little more detail, a little heavy, go through the guidelines a little bit more because the guidelines we showed on the slides aren't all the guidelines. So we want to make sure we do all those. And then Sharon and I will also work through a case, you know, where we'll look at documentation and show, okay, this is where they're showing that and stuff like that. So, if that's going to be interesting to you, just watch for a notice. When I get the approval, I'll put a notice up, and it will be it'll be an hour long. So it would be one CEU, and we are going to charge $49 for it. So we want to make sure that, for people that want to get some good, solid education, that it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to get a CEU. So if it's something you're interested in, please watch for that. And I'm not seeing any comments come in. So if anybody else has any, I'll look back through the ones that have been made so far to see if anybody else has any for us. Sharon, while I'm doing that, do you have anything else that you would like to put out there for people?
Well, it's just been a pleasure today, and kind of connecting with a few that I know, even though I can't see you or speak to you. We are on Facebook pretty much together, and it's been a pleasure, and I hope that it has been beneficial to you. And, the one way you learn this profession is by presenting, because you're forced to go research and do. So don't back off. Well, I'll never learn this. Well, yeah, that's what I said back in 2005 also. So it's been a pleasure. And Betty, I thank you for the opportunity to be with you today and with everyone else.
We're getting a lot of applause and thumbs up and things. So thanks, everybody. Kimberly says, outstanding about the webinar. I'll keep an eye out. Yay. So I'm glad you're excited for it, Kim. And then great presentation as always, ladies. Thank you, from Laura. Thank you, Laura, for that comment.
Yes.
And very informative. Thank you. Melissa says, thank you. Great presentation. Wonderful. We love doing these things. So Sharon and I probably will be doing more of them in the future on whatever kind of subjects catch our eye. Infectious disease. I worked in infectious disease for a long time too. So that's a really interesting one where, from an ICD-10 standpoint, I think we could do some neat ones too. So once again, if everybody has any comments or ideas for future healthcare happenings or webinars you'd like to see, just drop them in the comment, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow me on LinkedIn, send me messages on it, and we will try to make sure that we get everybody's things addressed. Kimberly says, absolutely very informative. And she is presenting on the 2/7/2022 at a local chapter. So that's great. So watch for Kimberly. She'll probably put a notice up on LinkedIn where she's doing it, if it's virtual and anybody can attend. Gretchen says,
I'll be doing Chicago area for Kim Wright.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the 9th of February on a Wednesday.
And I'm doing one in February for, I don't even know what chapter it is. I'm doing an auditor's toolbox presentation. So I'm excited about that one. So that should be cool.
I need to get in on that. I need a CEU there.
Yep. And then Gretchen says, great session, ladies. Thank you. Love your style. Oh, thanks. That's nice, Gretchen.
Well, I like to hear the style. I like that, to where hopefully they feel like they're part of it,
Yeah, that's the one thing that's hard when it's virtual like this, that you do miss some of that stuff. So I think it's nice when I get guests to come on, because then it's not just somebody watching me talk to myself basically for the time. I get to kind of interact with somebody else. And I think it makes it more inviting for people. So, and it's fun. So, and Kimberly says, nice.
And for everybody's knowledge, none of this was pre-rehearsed.
Oh, no.
None of this. We just started in, and here we are.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, I think, that kind of lends to authenticity and fun of it. I'm not one of those scripted, read the slide kind of, and people that see my stuff know that. I can't stand when people do that. I can read myself. Thank you. So I think, having this like this to be able to have our personalities show, is a real big plus. So I'm really glad that LinkedIn Live approved me to be a broadcaster. So this is a nice way that I've been able to continue to do that stuff when people can't go anywhere, and to hit a broader audience, because nobody's going to fly down to Florida. Well, I don't know, Florida might be nice in February to fly down here and see me talk for an hour, So it's good. So, and Kimberly, yes, I will share the invites. And Sharon, maybe that's something else we should start doing, is when we're speaking at different local chapters for things, if you want to send me a notice, I know you put your stuff on Facebook, then I can also list it on the LinkedIn stuff too, for things. So if you want to see or hear Sharon speak some more, we'll put it out there. Same thing to you, Kimberly. I know you do it for yours, but I'm happy to also, do it. We can maybe have some kind of running list that shows where we're all speaking.
Well, the chapters would love it.
Yes. Yep. All right. Well, and then Kimberly, yes, authentic indeed. Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. Well, then I think we are at a wrap, and I appreciate everybody's time. Ms. Sharon, I so appreciate your time. And so watch for some notices coming up. And my next healthcare happenings, I'm going to have my friend, the attorney Mike Sakopoulos, back, and he's going to talk about the No Surprises Act. So that is going to be a really good one for everybody to listen into. So it will be either February 3rd or 4th. If it's the Thursday, he couldn't do it, so it's the day before. It would be the Wednesday. So watch for, in fact, here, let me go on my little calendar here and I'll tell you.
February 3rd, it looks like.
February 2nd, because he couldn't make the Thursday. Yeah. So February 2nd, I'll have Mike Sakopoulos about the No Surprises Act. So thanks, everybody, and we will see you soon. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye, everybody.